Hello, I'm Jeffrey Lossos Ferns, and I'm here at C Gallery with Dr. Kristy Ingebo. And tonight is our C Gallery Salon. Our topic tonight is COVID-19. Um, Dr. Kristy Ingebo, I want you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kristy Ingebo. I work at Phoenix Children's Hospital. I've been there since 1987, one of the attendings there, and my specialty is gastroenterology and nutrition.
What is gastroenterology?
So the GI system is everything to do with eating and metabolism and creating energy and living, so we consider it very important as GI doctors. Is the esophagus, stomach, small bowel, colon, the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, all of that stuff. So any diseases that affect the GI tract are us, and since I'm pediatric, we also, our specialty also includes nutrition. So nutrition is a big part of what I do, and children that have any kind of a disease, if it's bad enough, they're going to have trouble growing. And growth is hugely important to children, so that's a big part of our specialty. So gastroenterology and nutrition, we're the ones that do endoscopies, so we'd be doing diagnostic or therapeutic endoscopies and things like that.
And one of the reasons I invited Kristy here today, she's a dear friend of mine, we've known each other for many years, so she has many roles in her life, is because we were having a conversation on COVID-19, and she was sharing with me her time in New York City. She volunteered when they were going through their heavy pandemic piece to go and be a volunteer relief medical in New York City. It was really fascinating to hear firsthand that experience. So can you share that with us?
Yeah, so the time when I went to New York, what happened throughout the United States is they closed down elective surgeries and endoscopies and procedures. So I was able to clear my schedule for May. And with the help of my wonderful partners who pitched in and covered, I was able to move patients and have my partners covering me. And I was able to go and have the opportunity of volunteering in New York. I'm very glad I got to do that. I was one small piece of a large operation, part volunteer like myself and part relief organizations that hire people sort of like locum tenens to go where they're needed. So many things struck me in New York. When we arrived there, my long-suffering husband went with me, even though he had to stay in the hotel room and live in a locked-down city. But one of the things that struck me was the people I worked with. I worked with two groups of people. One group lived in New York and had been there from the beginning and were exhausted, had seen it all, just like you heard on, like you heard on the news. And they had to keep going. They were basically working pretty much every day. Even with us coming in to do relief, people were still working because they kept creating new facilities for doctors and nurses to work in. So the people that were working hard in existing facilities didn't always get that much relief, but at least the patients got the care they needed. But these people had just been through so much, being locked down in the middle of winter in a city like New York, where most people live in small apartments and just very congested, completely opposite of Phoenix, where you can go outside in the winter and recreate. Anyway, and they all just had such experiences with patients and then with their own friends and family. Almost all of them had somebody that they'd either been in the ICU, very sick, they were worried about, or died, or whatever. So it just, the people there were just going through so much. When I got there, they had a large number of people that were sort of stepping down from the ICU, and they created sort of hospital beds in facilities that weren't hospitals. So I was working in two hotels that they created hospital beds in, and that was a challenge in and of itself. You're not in your comfort zone where you have everything available to you. But these were people who had made it through the ICU or were sick enough they had to be monitored and watched and helped, but not quite sick enough to be in the hospital. And they were trying to get some hospital beds, non-ICU beds, available for people with serious illnesses that had been waiting for treatment because of the epidemic. The people with cancer waiting for chemotherapy and all these other serious illnesses that were kind of put on hold during during the surge of the epidemic. So that's what I did there, and I was really happy I got the chance to do it.
Now, you also shared some images with me, some photos and stuff, and one that struck me really hard was the tents that were set up in the park, and also just the
Central Park,
the loneliness of you and your husband, Jim, walking through the streets. And so in addition to what you were dealing with on the medical aspect, there was also a psychological effect. And so I can only imagine what the community was going through continually like that.
We were in Queens. The hotel, or the hospital I was associated with was Elmhurst in Queens, which has obviously been hit very hard. And then I had 1 day a week off, which was great. I didn't expect to have a day a week off. I'm like, good, so we'd bike across to Manhattan, and it was a ghost town. It was just, like you said, the isolation.
And the reason I'm sharing this is because, it's really random in terms of pockets that are affected and depending on, controls and, individuals and stuff. I've lost, 12 plus friends and colleagues to COVID, and a lot of my friends that have died or my colleagues that have died, have come from Latino or Native communities, African American communities and stuff. So for me to hear firsthand what was going on in there, we see things on the news, but we say, is that real? And it's so far away that is it going to affect us? But this pandemic has no borders, and it pops up and it surges and stuff like that. So, and then you got back to Phoenix.
So then I came back here, things were okay, and then it surged here. Now, as we'll talk about later, children, thank goodness, do not usually get sick or sick enough to be hospitalized with it. So Phoenix Children's Hospital has never had very many patients with COVID in it, but Phoenix got hit very hard, and there were, just like New York, there were exhausted ICU and ER doctors and other doctors here in Phoenix. And what happened here was just like what happened in New York, is that people from outside Arizona came in to help here. So we were so lucky that Banner University had just built a beautiful new building. They were about to demo the old 12-story building that Phoenix Children's Hospital used to be located in, so I know that building very well. They were set to demo it, and they were smart. They did not demo it, and they were able to turn that into ICU beds and hire physicians and nurses from outside Arizona to come in. That's how we survived. That's how Phoenix made it. And we were lucky. The other thing was New York sort of led the way in figuring out how to treat really sick people with COVID. So we had a lot more knowledge by the time it came here, and the relief organizations had geared up in terms of hiring people that, a lot of physicians were not able to do their jobs because elective things were closed down, so then they could go into these relief organizations. So that whole mechanism was working much better by the time Phoenix was surging as opposed to New York, who hit it first. Although, can't go without mentioning the Navajo reservation. The Navajo and Hopi, the Arizona reservation, was just hit really hard. Their death rate per capita was approximately the same as New York. It was just severe there, and there's probably many reasons, but unfortunately, even though it's the United States, 50% of homes, no electricity, 50% no running water. That's on our own Arizona state reservation, and of course that means they don't have flush toilets, they have latrines, and they don't have electricity. It's very hard to have hygiene, and then a large population are living in one-room buildings, and there are many generations. So the older generation that may be more at risk is right there with the kids and everybody else. So anyway.
So that's a good segue. I'm going to let you take us through how we got here. But let's start with how we got here in terms of what is a pandemic, and then we can go closer into how we got here locally.
Okay, so the things I was going to cover or touch on tonight would be epidemics through the ages. What are epidemics? How do you start a pandemic? How does it start? Then the process of all of us learning about a new disease, the way news is reported, and then who's at risk for COVID and why. And then why infants do not get sick, or infants and young children rarely get as sick, and then ending with kind of COVID anxiety and isolation, and how does that affect us? So epidemics started once we had what we think of as civilization. So civilization is people living in cities, you have animal husbandry, and you have agriculture. So instead of nomadic tribes scattered around, isolated from each other, you have population centers, and you have that because you figured out how to do agriculture and grow food and how to raise animals. And that's when epidemics start. So I've written a list here of big epidemics and then the recent ones. Because sometimes people think, well, this came out of nowhere. Not true. We've had epidemics for years. So starting in 1347, our biggest death loss to date was 200 million people died in Black Death, which was the bubonic plague. We now have treatment for that one, but back then we didn't, and realized that we've got 8 billion people alive today, but back then in the 1300s, there were not that many people alive, and 200 million human beings died. The next big one, 1520, was smallpox. That's where we have 56 million died. That's sort of the next biggest so far. And smallpox, of course, we managed to get a vaccine for, so that was fabulous. Swine flu, or the Spanish flu, 1918 to 1919. So this is getting a little bit more into timeline that we're, modern times. And this is sometimes, this is the one you hear the most often compared to COVID. So that was 1918, 1919. My mother's father, so my maternal grandfather, died in the swine flu epidemic when my mother was 9 months old. And about 40 to 50 million people worldwide died in that one. The Asian flu in 1957. So from 1957 on, I've actually written down all of them. So some of them are not that big. But if you say, well, what's gone on since the 1950s? 57, Asian flu, 1.1 million. Hong Kong flu, 1968, 1 million deaths worldwide. HIV/AIDS is ongoing since 1981. AIDS is an ongoing epidemic that 25 to 35 million people have died from. We have very effective treatment now. This has turned into a chronic illness. And the thing I compare HIV to is with COVID is the anxiety and the fear people have with COVID reminds me of what it was like back then when HIV first came out. SARS was the first. So this is the virus for COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2. So the first SARS was in 2002, 2003, and that killed about 770 people. Then the swine flu, again, H1N1. So we heard about this in Arizona, 2009 to 2010, and that killed about 200,000 people. The next one, MERS, was very small as far as deaths, 850. But I mentioned MERS because part of the MERS virus is part of the current COVID too. And then Ebola, 2014 to 2016, killed 11,000, but that did not make it to the United States. That was in Africa. That kills people so quickly it doesn't spread. If a virus is too good at killing its host, it doesn't spread. So that's a horrible one that so many people die from it so quickly. And then that brings us up to COVID-19. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. So that's the 2019 to present. Worldwide, we're up to almost 1 million deaths, and then in the United States, it's just over 200,000. So that's kind of...
And one of the things I was noticing here is, so we start out in the year 1317 and we go to 2019. There's these big gaps, between 1317 and 1968. And then between 1981 and 2009, there's these rapid pandemics starting and stuff.
Right.
Does that...
Well, part of it is just what I chose to write down. Yeah. If I'd written all of them down, there would have been a couple more pages. Yeah. So there are, I wrote the really big ones, like 200 million catches your attention. And then once I got to 1957, I wrote them all. Okay. So between 1918 and 1957, there were a couple of small ones. But these, from then on, I wrote them.
So this succession here, 2002, 2009.
Yes. So you're right. And I think as we move to our next topic, how do you start a pandemic? What do you do if you want to start a pandemic? And I think we'll see why more and more people, more and more demand for food ends up more and more pandemics starting. So the meat from factory farms is about 90% of the world meat. So about 90% of the meat eaten is from a factory farm. If you want to start a pandemic, you take animals, you pack them tightly in a football-sized shed in harsh and unsanitary conditions, and that's the perfect recipe for starting a pandemic. Why is that? Well, there's ammonia from decomposing waste, and it burns their lungs. So the animals are in addition to being very crowded and close together, their lungs are being burned. There's a lot of stress, and that the immune system goes down with stress in human beings and animals. The immune system goes down with stress, lack of fresh air and sunlight. And these animals, the way they breed animals, so it's all about money when people are breeding animals for people to eat. And they end up being genetically almost identical. They select them out for whatever, like if they want more white meat with the turkey, or they want, whatever they want. They select them out until these are almost genetically identical animals. And so they're all going to be susceptible to the same virus. So you're not going to have a population that resists the virus. They're all, it's almost like they're twins, all of these unfortunate animals that are in these horrible conditions. So the CDC and the World Health Organization has warned for years that livestock health is our weak link. So if you want to prevent a future pandemic, the first place you should look is where does it start? And most of them start with these horrible conditions with the animals. So we've had swine flus from the pigs. If you look at the names of these epidemics, avian flus from chickens, and then we had the civets. The camels were the MERS, that was the one on there, and then civets, and so these are animals that were grown in crowded areas. So the other thing about it is if a population is very crowded together, a virus can be more deadly, kill more of the host and still survive. So remember I said, like Ebola, it killed people so quickly that it didn't move on. Well, if you've got this huge crowded area, you can kill them quickly and quickly move on to the next crowded area. So you can really breed a deadly virus by doing this. So if you want a deadly virus, put your animals close together. And then viruses as well as bacteria. So there's bacterial pandemics like the Black Death, bubonic plague, Yersinia pestis. We still get a few cases every now and then in Arizona of that, but we have antibiotic for it. But the animals are given antibiotics, and then they get resistant bacteria. So then you can recreate a plague of a resistant bacteria. So another way to start a pandemic, this one probably has to do with the bat. The bat is often involved in the pandemic, which may seem odd. But bats, for some reason we don't understand, they can have as many as 200 viruses and not be sick. These bats are just flying around, they're not sick. In this particular epidemic, the pangolin may have played a role. We don't know this for sure yet, but both the bat and the pangolin have viruses similar to SARS-CoV-2, and both were in the Wuhan wet market. So if you look at the Wuhan wet market, they were both for sale to eat. You might wonder who would want to eat a bat. I think that might be used as an aphrodisiac. I'm not sure, but anyway, it is sold to eat.
That's not what I use.
Yeah, so it's there's really good pharmaceutical agents for that situation that doesn't require a bat to be involved. I'm just gonna promote big pharma there. Anyway, so why is it called a wet market? You might want to know, you may not want to know. It's all the fish that are alive, that are they're selling live fish to eat. They're splashing, there's ice melting because they're trying to preserve raw meat, and then there's blood just draining out from all these dead animals. So it's so wet that, and then many species are together in close proximity, and that's kind of a recipe for wet market. And I just want to say, they're not just in China. They're not just in Wuhan. New York City, did you see that? Yeah. There's a big article on that. New York City and other cities in the United States, but New York City has wet markets.
I've seen them in every major city in the United States and across the globe.
Yeah, so it's not, this is not just China. This is, these conditions are all over. Another thing that occurs, looking at the wet markets in China, but many of these animals, the people that are raising the animal, this is their livelihood. These are poor people whose eating food every day depends on their livelihood of raising these animals to sell, and they often live with the animals. So you have humans living in close contact with the animal too. So you've got this just whole
And one of the discussions we have regarding that also is when we're looking at climate change and also population explosions in certain regions, encroaching into areas of places where humans and animals never really interacted. Exactly. And all of a sudden they're interacting right there, which can be the kickoff for a pandemic.
Global warming, clearly. Global warming and all the ecology, the too many human beings alive and encroaching on all of the animals' areas. Absolutely. This is all related.
So that takes us into the process of learning about a new disease. And I'm going to share my personal experience. So, I went through the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I was in my young 20s, did a lot of volunteer work in San Francisco and working with people in stages of AIDS. So when this pandemic started, and all this information started to come out, I started to, for some reason, I had become almost complacent, and I said, okay, well, what do they say on the news, and what do I have to do, and what do I have to follow? But it kept changing so rapidly that I didn't trust the information coming out anymore. But you shared with me the process of learning a new pandemic, which kind of, now when I read the news and I listen to something, I'm like, oh, that's the way of science. Right. And it's being discovered. Can you share that process?
Yes, exactly. So what happened with this pandemic is I started noticing a lot of anxiety among people. And I'm thinking, why are these people so anxious and why am I not anxious? I mean, obviously I'm sad, about people dying, and I'm sad about the economy being shut down to prevent spread. I'm sad about all of it, but I'm not anxious. I'm not going out there thinking, I'm just on the verge of death myself. And I started thinking about what is it like for someone who didn't go to med school. I mean, I've spent most of my life as a physician. I'm old enough now that I've spent most of my life as a physician, and I went to med school decades ago, and I read scientific journals ever since, and it's just ingrained in me. And so I started thinking about it from somebody's point of view who they're an engineer or a teacher or a fire person or a sales clerk. They didn't go to med school. That wasn't their interest. That's not their career. How does it look to them? And I realized why it created so much anxiety. So let's start at the beginning. How do you learn about a new disease? How does a new disease catch your attention? Especially something like COVID, where every symptom of COVID exists in all the other respiratory viruses, right? I mean, there's no brand new symptom here. They're all the symptoms are similar to other diseases. So the first reported cases have got to be severe, or nobody's going to notice. Somebody's got a mild cold, nobody's going to say, oh, maybe you've got a new virus. No, they have to be severe. They have to be in the ICU. They have to be dying. And symptoms are usually similar to known diseases. So in order to be noticed, there needs to be an unusual cluster. So not just one person in the ICU with a respiratory illness that you don't know which virus it is, okay? But it's got to be a cluster, a lot of cases. And so when you first discover the disease, the population you have are those people who, for whatever reason, got the severe disease and are much more likely to die. So the first mortality rates that come out are the mortality for this subpopulation that was really sick, that was noticed. Not for the asymptomatic person walking around the street with COVID that doesn't even know they have it. So your mortality rates just look like, oh my God, and then people pick that up and start comparing them to other viruses where we know the mortality rate for the whole population, including people with no symptoms, and they just look like horrendous mortality rates, when in reality we just don't know what the mortality rate is. So then a new virus is going to have similarities and differences to other viruses, and it takes time to learn. So you get a new virus, and it's a respiratory virus, and maybe you think, oh, they're all the same, they progress on pneumonia and whatever. No, every virus is different. There's similarities and differences, and they're fascinating. And it takes time to learn this. A virus, a new disease, doesn't come to you with an instruction manual. It comes to you with a lot of questions. Okay, so what are the questions? An example would be, we hear this all the time, is it droplet contact, or is it airborne, or is it conditionally airborne? Sometimes it's airborne and sometimes it's not, which ends up being COVID. Humidity, is it worse with humidity? Is it worse with dryness? Turns out COVID, originally people thought humidity was worse. No, it's worse in dry climates, Arizona, because the droplets are smaller in a dry air. The air sucks out the water and the droplets are smaller, so they can go farther. So anyway, it's worse in the dry air. Temperature, is this a virus that is killed in the heat or killed in the cold? Is it seasonal? You know, is it gonna, you know, we heard this in the beginning, is it gonna go away in the summer and come back? Is it seasonal? And what is seasonal? We actually don't know why the viruses that are seasonal. It may actually be our society patterns rather than the virus that makes it seasonal. Antibodies. Do people make antibodies? Are the antibodies protective? So look at HIV. People make antibodies. The antibodies aren't protective. So just because you make an antibody doesn't mean that's going to protect you. So if you get antibodies from somebody who's had the disease and give them to someone else, does that help them? Well, you don't know that in the beginning. Those are things you have to figure out. It's not just a slam dunk on that. Do they make them? Are they protective? Is this a virus that's only acute, or can it be chronic? So RSV, it's a cold, you get it, you get over it, it's acute. Hepatitis C can go on and be chronic for decades until we finally, thank goodness, learned how to cure that one. HIV, same thing, goes on to be chronic. So is it acute or chronic? That's huge. I mean, are you going to get it, get over it, or what? What's the incubation period? Like, when is it safe for you to be around somebody? When do you know you're exposed to someone? How do you know how long it is until you might come down with the symptoms? And the incubation periods vary. There's some viruses it's 24 to 48 hours. Some viruses 10 to 21 days, like chickenpox. Some viruses it's out further. So that's a huge difference. The incubation period. Immune? Are you immune after the disease? After you get it and you're through it, are you now immune to it? Is it chickenpox where you're immune for the rest of your life, unless you get immunosuppressed for some reason? Or is it RSV, influenza that you can just keep getting every year? Maybe milder the next time, maybe not. How long are you immune? Are you immune for a few months, like some viruses? Are you immune for decades? What's the mutation rate? Is it going to change? And there's something called intensification that happens with dengue, which is a horrible virus. Some viruses, it's actually worse to get the next strain of it. Fortunately, it doesn't look like that for COVID.
So,
anyway.
so if I can insert something here. So listening to this right now, so the general public, like myself, I'm thinking, oh, well, I want to get the antibody because then I'm immune from it and stuff like that.
Right.
But what I'm also hearing is that because it's a new pandemic, most of that is unknown.
Exactly. It's unknown. Day one, it's totally unknown. Incubation period, who knows? Contagiousness, how contagious is it? Who knows?
And I think listening to this, what I'm relying on is my past experiences with the flu and the cold and stuff like that. But there's really so much unknown right now. You know?
Right.
So we can't fall back on our old system or our old way of thought for a new pandemic.
Your experience. Exactly. So all of this stuff is unknown day one. We know a lot now, but we don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
We know a lot, we don't know it all. But day one, we didn't know this. We didn't know which population is at risk. Usually infants are the ones you worry about the most with a respiratory virus. We all thought, oh my gosh, our children's hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. Not this disease. This is very different. And post-infectious, do you have a post-infectious state or not? You get it, you get over it, but then can you have, and so you may have heard of MISC, which is the post-infectious inflammatory syndrome, very rare, but can occur in children. So, these are all questions.
So now that we thoroughly depressed,
all these questions. So all these questions. So, okay, so you're depressed. I'm excited. I'm like, wow, something new to discover.
But I know
how could
what
you
I'm
find
going
this
to
out?
ask you because you've already shared this with me, and it did give me hope. So share with us this next piece of how you commented the last time we spoke on the massive amount of research and focus going into this. Can you share with us?
Okay, so basically, first of all, a disease comes up, it's brand new, and we really don't know anything about it. And these are all, I've listed many of the things we didn't know when it first started. Okay, so what happens? Well, then you study the disease, and it takes time, and there's a learning process that goes on. And this is part of medicine, and we're used to it because throughout my career, new diseases have popped up, and then we have a lot more technology and tools to study new diseases now than we used to. Back in the day, it would just sort of be like watching and seeing what happened to people. This has been unprecedented, the amount of information that has just flowed from research centers. I have a friend who is a tenured professor at Caltech, and in order for them to continue working in California in Caltech, they had to be researching COVID, or they their lab could not function because everything was locked down. So she wrote a huge grant to NIH, switched over from studying HIV to studying COVID, studying SARS-CoV-2. A lot of people did that, and then just in general, everybody wants to research this, from big pharma to the universities to the NIH, everybody. So a huge amount has come out about it. And what happens always in medicine, first published studies, there's small numbers, and you can have something happen by chance that actually isn't going to bear out in the long run. So you could say, well, gosh, this many people get cardiac disease with it, like a high percentage. But then as you get larger populations, you're like, oh, well, that's actually a small percentage, get that, it just happened. If there's small studies, the data isn't as good. You can't rely on the accuracy. But the small ones come out first. That's what you can get together quickly and publish, and then it incites other people to study the same thing. And it's collaborative. It's collaborative in the United States. It's collaborative globally. Somebody in a research lab publishes something. Somebody else looks at it and goes, "Oh, can we replicate that? Is that true in our situation?"
Which takes us into our next topic, because those studies then get published and get picked up by the news
newspaper,
and journalism.
Like it's the final word.
So then it comes to me, who's in fear of going outside and laughing, and all of a sudden I see, oh no, you can laugh, just not loud, or, or something like that. So take us into the news piece.
Okay, so into the news piece. Okay, so as these studies are published, your understanding grows and it changes. And it's important to realize that advice given today may not be as good as advice that we're going to give 2 months from now. And advice given 2 months ago was not necessarily the best advice, but it was based on what we knew at the time. Yeah. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know. So, and people hear advice is given, and then later on people say, well, maybe not. Well, that's because we learned more in the interim. It's not that people were wrong when they said it, it's just they were based on the best data they had.
And one of the reasons that I asked Dr. Kristy here today, Ingebo here today, is because what can we do on our part? And how do we walk through this, and how do we keep our families safe? And as we're continually moving and getting new information, looking at the news, and a lot of the news, especially a lot of the big media, it's clickbait, and it's,
right.
How long can we keep people on the station and stuff like that? So take us through those pieces.
Okay, so basically what the scientists are doing is they're continually learning new facts, reanalyzing data. Professionals are disagreeing, bringing up new theories. That's part of the process of medicine. That's what makes it fascinating. That's why I'm so glad my career has been in medicine, because it's constantly interesting and people debate each other, and that's how you learn and that's how you go forward. And so it's the scientific method. But what happens, like you're saying, is the news has to be interesting. So they're going to pick up on the severe cases. They're going to pick up on the unusual, oh my gosh, a healthy 19-year-old died kind of thing. Oh goodness, this whole family, everybody in this one family died. They're going to talk about the children, this very rare post-inflammatory response disease. It's like they're gonna go with, they need shock value, so they bring up the rare cases, and they also will jump on a new report when either it's bad news or it's promising a cure, like right away, or whatever, and the newspapers will jump on this before other groups validate or refute it. So that's part of medicine. So here's my theory, here's my research, this is my opinion, this is my theory, this is my research backing it. Somebody looks at it and says, let's see if we can either validate that or refute it. And that's what people do, but the way it comes out in the news is like they publish this story with this answer, and then they publish a conflicting one, and people are confused. But for me, that's just part of this learning process. It's like if you don't have a healthy dialogue, if you don't have people examine critically, you're not going to learn. This is how you learn it.
So in terms of the general public and stuff, and wanting to take care of ourselves and our families and our neighbors and our coworkers and stuff like that, where should we look for news?
Okay.
Or where should we look on how to take care of ourselves? And where's the most trustworthy information that we can then move into our circles?
Okay, so this is true not just with COVID, but with anything. Things that people can easily remember, the CDC. So they have a website. They have not just what's going on with COVID, but just like you're saying, we're going to talk about who's at risk and why. You can find it on the CDC website. You can literally just go to cdc.gov. NIH also has a website, and this is true with all kinds of medical things. They've got lots of information on there. They're easy to search. And then large hospital systems, so the Mayo Clinic. We have Mayo in Scottsdale, there's Mayo in Rochester. They have a lot of information, and they print it specifically for people to read it who are not necessarily in the healthcare profession. So just lay people that have other careers that need to read about things. So those three areas are always good. And in town, we also have Banner University and their information. So any large health organization has that. But if you're going to remember three, remember CDC, NIH, Mayo. If you're looking on one, you're not finding exactly what you want, look at another one. So, I would go there.
Yeah.
Like they're going to try to bring it all together for you and print it in a way that a person can read it without having an advanced degree. So speaking of the CDC, you can go on the CDC and you can look up who's at risk. So you're saying, to me, this should be a big push. I wish it were a bigger push. I know people have kind of heard who's at risk a little bit, but if we could educate people on what populations really need to be protected, who really needs to work from home, who needs to change their career path perhaps, and not be in a high-risk job. So first I'm going to just talk about maybe, maybe not, because there's some statements out there that are made like, oh, this is definite. And there's this maybe, maybe not includes age, okay, other than the very young, which we'll talk about. But age is in the maybe, maybe not, because as you get older, you have all these other diseases that do put you at increased risk. So age is a maybe, maybe not. Race, maybe. Or is it the disease? Is it the genetics of the race? Or is it the living condition and the careers of the people in specific races in this country, for example? Gender is a maybe, maybe not. Women may have an advantage, maybe not. Some medicines, if you're already on them, might actually help protect you. Some medical conditions might be a problem. And then maybe poverty and crowding is a problem, it seems like. That would make sense. We talked about the Navajo Reservation and the crowded areas of New York. Your occupation, so if you're in a service industry where you're serving, coffee at Starbucks to 1 million people a day, that's a lot different. I am in a hospital. We all have masks, face masks, gloves. We're socially distanced. I'm not going to get it. I'm in a hospital where, even the patients that have it, we're not going to get it from those patients. I didn't get it in New York. I treated patients, So anyway, basically some occupations. And pregnancy is a maybe, maybe not. And I just have to say, with regard to pregnancy, there was one study published in New York when it was surging. 15% of women delivering at this specific hospital, 15% of the women delivering had COVID, and 88% were asymptomatic. So I'm not even sure pregnancy is a risk. But anyway, there's, okay, now, increased risk, and what do we know? Increased risk for severe disease or for death. So, I'm going to hold this one up too. It's a little easier to kind of see. So, so obesity, and we'll talk about what is a BMI greater than 30. So obesity is a risk, and that's because obesity is an inflammatory state itself. So you don't want an inflammatory state existing and then get a disease where the inflammatory response is what leads to a serious outcome. Cancer that you're being treated for now, we don't know about history of cancer, if that's a risk. That may not be. If somebody had it and they're over it, that may not be. Type 2 diabetes, clearly. So obesity, type 2 diabetes, those go together, and probably type 1 diabetes, definitely type 2. Lung disease, so this could be COPD, it could be a severe asthma, not mild asthma, cystic fibrosis, and then, of course, smoking, present smoking, past smoking, as tobacco is, tobacco and marijuana. Tobacco is usually the big one, but smoking present and past. And then chronic kidney disease, which often goes along with the diabetes. Heart disease, that's atherosclerosis, hypertension, that kind of stuff. Organ transplant, you're on immunosuppressives because you have somebody else's organ, so you're immunocompromised. Sickle cell, thalassemia, liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver. Clotting disorders, brain disease with clots, and then immune compromised by drugs or by a disease. And I just note that if somebody has HIV and they're being treated, that is not considered immunocompromised, and the HIV drugs are not considered a problem at this point.
And I like your end note there. So everybody that was listening or looking at these types of diseases, you're like, well, I don't have any of those, or I have that. But her end note is there's an estimate that 40% of Americans are at risk. So if you look at all of these conditions within the health and wellness of Americans, 40% are at risk.
About 40%.
Yeah.
There's different people estimating different estimates, and that's kind of a middle of the road estimate of about 40%. And the big chunk comes from the type 2 diabetes, obesity field. Yeah. So about 40%. So some people are not at risk.
So before we go into what is BMI, can you share with us what is the inflammatory state?
Oh, okay. So basically, you look at your body, everybody has adipose cells, so fat tissue or adipose cells. So everybody has adipose cells. You have to have a certain number, and they serve as a storage organ for energy. But unbeknownst to people back when I was in med school, they're also the biggest hormone producers in our body. So we have a lot of endocrine organs like the thyroid and the parathyroids and the adrenals and pituitary. But your fat cells actually produce more hormones than all of those endocrine organs. And unfortunately, the hormones fat cells produce tend to be inflammatory or bad hormones or disease-producing hormones. So kind of like being slender and having a small number of fat cells is very, very helpful for longevity and for not contracting diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and cancer. Cancer is a disease that is increased with inflammatory state, and obesity is an inflammatory state. So just for example, 20% of all cancers are caused by obesity, and 35% of breast cancers are. So that's just an example of two things you may not link, but it's inflammatory. So type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar, the whole metabolic thing has been flipped by for a variety of complicated reasons, but high blood sugar hurts all of the blood vessels that go to the organs that are important, like the heart and the kidneys and so on. So unfortunately, with obesity comes insulin resistance, and the pancreas tries to shoot up the insulin production until it becomes exhausted at a point and can't, and the metabolic consequences end up with inflammation, and the immune system doesn't work as well, and then you get into these overreactions. So you may have heard of cytokine storm. Turns out, interesting point, it's a bradykinin storm that COVID unleashes rather than a cytokine storm, but the idea is an inflammatory state. The people that are dying are often dying of sort of gel-like stuff in their lungs, that it's inflammatory stuff that their body's created. So it hasn't been so much the destruction by the virus as what the body has done in inflammatory response to it. So in the beginning, we thought it was like a cytokine storm. Cytokines are part of the immune system, but it turns out it's probably more likely a bradykinin storm, which is part of the clotting system. The way they figured that out, I just find this fascinating. You know, there's a few supercomputers around. I'll get to you in 1 second. There's a few supercomputers around, and they put all this data in this supercomputer, and it took it about a week to analyze it all, and it spit out bradykinin storm, not cytokine storm. No. Anyway, we have a question from the audience.
Yes. How did the NSAIDs play into this?
In the beginning, it was said there was a fear that NSAIDs would make it worse, and then it seems that's probably not true.
And for what is an NSAID?
An NSAID would be Advil, Aleve, ibuprofen, all of those. They're anti-inflammatory, so you kind of think they'd be a good thing. But then there's the clotting and the blood dyscrasias, which could make them a bad thing. So I think it's a little bit unknown, but in the beginning they were kind of down on the NSAIDs, and then fairly within a few months they were kind of like, man, they're probably okay. But if it does turn out that the bradykinins are important for the severe COVID, the reason it's important, like we actually have existing drugs that are anti-interleukins that would calm down the cytokine system. Yeah. We also have existing drugs for bradykinins. And if you have an existing drug, you're golden, because it takes a long time and a lot of money to get a new drug through. But if you have an existing
drug... And to go on top of your question, so this is the first I heard, but I actually have a bottle of Advil in my medicine cabinet that I haven't touched because of the old...
The original.
So I've been suffering with these headaches.
Well, Jim, I'm glad you brought that up. Let let me do a little deep dive into Advil, okay, before you start taking it. I don't want to be, so let me do a little deep dive. I'll text you about
Okay.
that. But yeah, no, I know even when I was in New York, they were saying, okay, we're probably Advil is okay,
But that's a process that we talked about earlier, of science and information coming.
Maybe more news will come out, and it's not. But
so let's move on to BMI and how do we take care of ourselves, and then the COVID anxiety piece.
Okay, so BMI, unfortunately, BMI is not a very intuitive concept. It's a person's weight in kilograms, something we don't use in the United States, except in medicine, where we're constantly going back and forth. But anyway, weight in kilo divided by height in meters multiplied by height in meters. So basically, your height times your height underneath your weight. So you divide your height times your height into your weight. Well, if you really, really want to know, and I'm not saying anyone has to do this, but if you really want to know what your BMI is, the easiest thing to do is Google BMI calculator. A bunch of them pop up. NIH has one. You can actually use feet and inches and pounds, put it in. They'll do all the calculation for you. So if you really want to know your BMI, you can do that. But what in the medical world, like, I think one thing about COVID epidemic is it's important to know what did we mean medically when we say being overweight becomes a problem or increases morbidity, okay? So we look at a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9 is normal, healthy BMI. 25 to 29 would be called significantly overweight, and then 30 plus would be obese. And there's a big increased risk of COVID in that obese category or over 30. And then there's an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cancer, and heart disease, all that kind of stuff.
So let me stop you right there. So when you say there's an increased risk with COVID, what's happening in the body with that increased risk when the virus enters the body?
So the immune system doesn't do a good job of getting rid of it, and also that inflammatory state, which is really the part that can lead to the ICU admission that you don't want. Is intensified by already the body being in an inflammatory state.
Okay. So it's just compounded.
Yeah, it just kind of goes on. So each increase in BMI increases risk for COVID. So for example, I had a couple of other friends that volunteered in New York, and they were working in ICUs, and they had some like 400, 500 pound people. And so big they had trouble proning them or couldn't prone them, which is, putting you on your stomach so you can breathe better with this particular disease. Anyway, so each increased risk, increases your mortality. So, and then sometimes it's easier for people to think about, well, what's ideal body weight and where does obesity start? So one way to calculate ideal body weight is to look, so women and men are different. So women 5 feet tall, ideal body weight would be 100 pounds, and then for every inch you add 5 pounds. So if you're 5 feet tall, 100 pounds would be so-called ideal body weight. 5 foot 5 inches would be 100 pounds plus 5 times 5 is 25. So 125 pounds would be ideal for 5 foot 5. 5 foot 5 happens to be the average height of women in the United States. A woman who's 5 foot 10, ideal body weight would be 150 pounds. For men who are 5 feet tall, 106 pounds is your starting, and then it's 6 pounds for every inch. So I'm just going to show that real quick. This is the BMI and the. So if you're looking medically at, BMI 18 to 24.9 healthy, 25 to 29 significant overweight. That's a medical judgment on morbidity, and then 30 plus would be obesity. BMI increases risk, and then if you look at ideal body weight. 5 feet for women, 100 pounds, and then add 5 pounds for every inch. For men, 5 feet is 106 pounds, and then you add 6 pounds. So average height for men in the United States is 5 feet, 9 inches. So that'd be 160 pounds is ideal body weight. And then obesity starts about 15 to 20% over ideal body weight. So that's a little easier way for people to see it, than. Anyway, so the point is, for people in that category, the ideal is to try to lose weight. Sadly, during the COVID epidemic, people have gained weight. This actually published data. Why? People are sitting at home. They can eat all day long. They're not doing their jobs, running around. But gyms have closed. It's an unfortunate. It's like the opposite of what you want to happen. Some of the things that have been,
So
part of it.
So this BMI here, is this pretty consistent in terms of like for a lot of diseases?
Yeah. So this is it. BMI is great scientifically. It's just hard for people to conceptualize. Ideal body weight is a little easier for people to conceptualize. Like, how many pounds over ideal body weight are you? And then I just have to say, this is a rare situation, but you know, the big muscle builder men that have a huge amount of muscle mass and very low body fat. So their BMI may be 30 and they're not obese, they're like very lean, so they are not at risk. So that is the one bad thing about BMI, is it doesn't look at percent fat. So the problem with looking at percent fat is it's hard to do. There's a machine that you can stand on and grip, and it runs a current through you. You don't feel the current, and it can tell you your percent body fat. It's fairly good at it. This is a $20,000 machine, so people are not going to have this at home. They have a scale at home they can stand on. They're going to have this machine. The other way, the original way, the most accurate way to calculate BMI is literally being submerged in a box underwater and calculating. Okay, that's not happening here. I'm not a swimmer. That's not going to be me in that box. But so but what you really care about is how much body fat does a person have. So there are people like the football players and the bodybuilders, especially the men, that you can look at those people and see that they're lean, okay, because they've got huge muscles.
No, I actually looked here.
They have veins on top of their muscles.
I'm not going to say where I fall on this, but
I'm pretty sure
my nickname's Twiggy.
So yeah, I'm going to say you're going to get the sun. You're good. People under ideal body weight actually live longer than people at ideal body weight. So there you go. So longevity. So good for you. You know.
Anyway, what some other really good information that we talked about is how you explain this piece here.
Oh, the infants,
which is fascinating for me, because for the general public, that's kind of an unknown. You're thinking, well, they're healthier, but why are they healthier? Explain that piece.
First of all, so I'm a pediatrician, okay? But babies have small airways, they have small noses, you know, everything's small. Their lungs don't have the reserve that a healthy teenager or young adult would have. And so they usually get hit really hard with these viruses. They're the ones, and the preemies are the worst. These babies that are the 24 weekers, the 30 weekers, and they're still infants. And those are the ones that really get hit. We have studies where they have COVID in their nasal passages and they're not sick, you know. I mean, some get sick. There's going to be the exception. But why is that? So this is the opposite of the usual respiratory virus. And this is true up to around at least age 8 or 9. So, and I'm going to show a little diagram I wrote of this. But if you think about your cells, look at this square as your cell. Like down here is your cell. And this circle up on top with the spikes, that's the coronavirus. So you've seen drawings of a circle with spikes on it. The coronavirus has these spikes. Inside of it is the RNA. That RNA needs to get into your cell, hijack your body, your cell's mechanism for duplicating DNA and RNA. It needs to get in there and hijack your own mechanism in order to reproduce. A virus left on its own dies. It needs a host. It needs you, in the case of this virus, needs to get into your cell. So it puts a spike into your cell. But then, in order for the actual RNA to enter, to get into the cell, this little scissors has to come by and snip off the spike. That's a protease. So proteases cut proteins. In this case, there's a protease that cuts off the spike. And once the spike is cut off, then the virus can enter your cell, hijack your own mechanism, and start reproducing. So interestingly, in infants, they have very, very low levels of this particular TMPRSS2 is the name for this protease. It exists for a different reason. It doesn't exist to allow coronavirus into our cells, but that's what the coronavirus uses it for. So infants, thank God, I'm so lucky as a pediatrician that these kids have very low levels of this up to at least age 8 or 9. So occasionally you'll have a kid get sick, but this is the leading theory on why kids just aren't getting it. And once I read that, it made sense, because up until then, as a pediatrician, I'm just like, what the heck? But anyway, so very interesting. So if we could just decrease our levels of this protease as adults, it would be nice.
But the other thing I want to reiterate here, and especially with schools opening and everything like that, is the children can still be hosts. You know?
Yeah. Oh, they can. Yeah. It's interesting. Now, here's a good example. There's articles published both ways on this.
Yeah.
There are articles publishing children, just like we usually think of, are very good at passing on infections to everybody because they're dirty little creatures. They're running around. They're touching everything. They've got, runny noses and all that stuff. But there's some other articles published showing not much spread from child to family members that are adults. So I don't know where that's at. So I'm just going to say right now, we've got articles on both sides of the divide. We don't know.
And the safest thing is to err on caution.
Yeah, err on the safe side and put a mask on those whole kids.
So we're going to end our conversation. We're going to talk about COVID anxiety and isolation. So we just went through this, basically apocalyptic horror film, which is actually real. And now we're at a point where we're opening up again, globally and stuff. I've actually seen with close friends of mine in conversation a high level of anxiety to the point where there was a fear of actually even going out,
There was a person in New York that was in his apartment, and he would take a bucket and a rope and lower it down, have food placed, bring it up, isolate it for 3 days before eating it, and he never left the room.
Yeah.
I mean,
So talk
some-
about the anxiety and isolation pieces, and what are ways, we've even had experiences here in the gallery where a person came in and it was their first time out. And you could see their body language and stuff, and the fear and trepidation, and then the interaction, and actually they would relax at the piece, and they'd return and stuff, but it was literally her first day out, and her body language said everything. So talk a little bit about anxiety and isolation.
Okay, so when we talk about anxiety from deaths from COVID, I think it's important to look at deaths from other things. It's like there's deaths all the time. There's car accidents, there's heart attacks, there's whatever. In the United States, every year, 2.8 million people die. So we're talking about currently 200,000. That's a lot. That's a lot of deaths from COVID. But 2.8 million die every year, and 3/4 of them are from the top 10. Interestingly, 500,000 people die every year from a smoking-related illness. So they've chosen to smoke tobacco, and this has been our leading cause of premature death for decades. Is smoking tobacco. Obesity is giving it a run for the money now, but it's been our leading cause. So 500,000 die from a smoking-related death. So looking at all the deaths, heart disease kills 650,000 people every year. That's about 1/4 of the deaths. And then cancer, close behind, is 600,000. And then we have accidents like car accidents at 170,000. So in the 1 to 44-year-old age range, the young people, cars are the #1 killer, and they still are. Probably killing less due to this epidemic because people aren't driving as much. And then every year, approximately 56,000 die of influenza. And so our normal influenza, pneumonia, whatever, 56,000 die. Less people died of flu this year. It was on target to be a bad flu year. And man, we started that social isolation and people going home, and the flu season was cut off because social masking and social isolation works and closing things down. And then suicide is 50,000 a year, and suicides are up with COVID. And that's the second leading cause in the 10 to 34-year-old. So just to show you some of these numbers, just real quick, just so to kind of put in perspective, what does 200,000 mean? It's a lot. But 2.8 million die every year, 650,000 from heart disease, 600,000 from cancer, 170,000 from accidents, 56,000 usually about from influenza, and 50,000 from suicide. There's a bunch of others in there, but those were kind of the top ones, and then the leading ones that people sometimes don't think about.
Yeah, and one of the things that, not to minimize COVID, but I remember when the death rate was 1, and one person, the first person had died. And then you think of influenza and the data from a lot of these, that's a year, span of collecting data. But COVID, from the first death to where we're at now, has been such a short period of time.
Right. So start in the world, it started in November.
Yeah.
So we're coming up close to a year because
Yeah.
we're in October now.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, it was kind of the January, February is when we started here. But yeah, so you never have zero risk of dying. And when you the whole COVID lockdowns, less people have probably died of car accidents and influenza, but obviously people have died of COVID. And also not to minimize the fact that at one point, with 4% of the world's population, we had 25% of the deaths.
Yeah.
Now Brazil is having a lot of deaths in India, so we're maybe 20% of the world deaths now, but just saying that we did not do a great job, given that we only have 4% of the population and 25% of the deaths worldwide were from the United States at that time. So anxiety can take many forms. So some people are really afraid that they're going to die from this, either themselves or other people. And you need to be more concerned about, if you're not in one of these risk categories, you probably are not going to die from it. Good chance you could be asymptomatic or no symptoms if you had it, but you don't want to give it to someone who is in a risk category. That's the big thing. It's like, don't visit grandma during, a bad time in the epidemic, or if you visit, be very careful. And with that. So I feel bad for people who have no risk factors who think that they're going to die of it. It reminded me of back in the day when AIDS first came out, and people who had no risk factors thought that they were going to get it.
Well, there was a lot of unknowns. I remember, anytime I had a cough or a lesion or something like that, all of a sudden you think, oh, there it is.
It, yeah.
And the anxiety shoots up really, really quickly and stuff.
Right. And now you have allergies. I have a cough for an allergy. So every time I cough, people think I've got COVID. I become social.
Well, I know. If you've been in the grocery store, you cough, and I'm like,
yeah, I know. It's I'm like, I don't want to go out because I'm gonna have my. I've coughed for 30 years. Nobody cared. Now everybody cares.
So we're gonna close pretty soon here, but I want to talk about the anxiety piece because we are opening up, and we are moving into flu season. And I was listening to a piece today on Wisconsin, because Wisconsin's numbers are shooting up rapidly right now, and the fear is that with the cold seasons coming in, people are going to be in these closed communities versus open space. We're a little bit more fortunate in Arizona because we're going into our good weather. We were not in air conditioning pieces. But talk about how we take care, how we move from an anxiety piece. What are things we can do moving back into trying to normalize society, especially moving into what a lot of the news has been saying is going to be a horrific next 3 months.
Right.
How do we take care of ourselves? How do we move into those spaces?
All right. So one thing I would say is don't be afraid of something you don't need to be afraid of. So some people have had COVID, they weren't very sick with it, but they're afraid they're contagious forever, and that's not true. We have very set guidelines. From the first day of symptoms, 10 days later, if you're better, not perfect, haven't had a fever for 3 days, you're no longer contagious. Don't keep getting COVID tests because they can be positive for up to 3 months at least from little fragments of the virus that are not contagious anymore. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid of something you don't need to be afraid of. If you're a young, healthy person without one of these risk factors, don't be afraid that you are going to die from it. Yeah, you could, but it'd be like winning the lottery kind of odds. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid of something you don't need to be afraid of. And then people worry about the future and what will future life be like, and will we ever get back to normal? So I think one of the big things I say to my patients and families are like, you figure out a way to enjoy your life now with whatever the restrictions are right now. So you figure it out. It might be different from what your life was like before. And I think people are doing this, they're doing it. But some people are still kind of in this mentality of, well, this is going to be over and everything will be exactly like it was. And I'm just sort of holding up and waiting for that. And I'm like, no, you need to get out and you need to figure out what you can enjoy that's safe.
And on that thought, I always share, with our history in this pandemic is that we have a social responsibility to each other. And as humans, when we first started coming together, however many thousands of years we started forming communities and stuff, there is an unwritten social responsibility that we care for each other. And how do we care for each other? Yes, I'm 19 and, I ride a bike and I'm healthy and stuff like that. but caring for each other, we have no idea around us who's at risk and stuff.
Right.
And socially, our responsibility in a community is to take care of each other. You know? Right. So I want to imprint that as, yes, go out and explore the world and try to get back to whatever normal is for you, but also to be kind and respectful of that person next to you that you don't know that might have
they could be immunosuppressed.
They
could have type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, because that's the only way we're going to get back to a normal.
Yeah, if you can quit spreading it to the people that get really sick and overwhelm our healthcare system. Who cares if people get mild colds or have asymptomatic, but everybody cares if the hospital is so clogged with COVID patients and sick people in ICUs that you can't do your cancer treatments, you can't do your other stuff. You know, it's like people suffer that don't have COVID when our hospitals are overwhelmed with COVID and at our clinics and shut down and all that. So there's some easy things you can do. Exercise is really helpful to your immune system and it's really helpful to your mental state. So if your favorite exercise is not available, then figure out a different one. You know, if when the gyms were all closed, if that was your favorite thing, then you need to figure out an outdoor whatever. I bought my husband an elliptical machine because that was his favorite thing indoor. And I'm like, he's like, oh, it'll be over in 30 days. I'm like, no, just buy the elliptical and then we'll have it. You know, whatever you need to do. Take up hiking. Hiking in Arizona is fabulous. You know, with or without a mask, you can get 15 feet away from people. I mean, there's trails that, you know, you hike on, you don't see anybody else. But so exercising is really important. Trying to, if you're not at ideal body weight, trying to achieve ideal body weight or get down to it is helpful. Vitamin D, in general, vitamin D seems to be very good for lots of viruses and other infectious diseases. I personally, once I got my vitamin D level into the 70s, I quit being sick with everything at work. You know, I mean, about 10 years ago when the data came out on vitamin D, I started taking 5,000 international units a day, got my vitamin D up to a great range, and I quit getting sick when I get sick. I mean, vitamin D is helpful. There's some studies on COVID. It looks like people with low vitamin D levels were more at risk. Now, fat cells sequester fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamin D. So the more overweight a person is, the more likely their vitamin D is low. So that's another part of obesity is sequestering vitamin D. But vitamin D is cheap. Buy it over the counter.
Yeah,
take it.
I'm doing a pint of ice cream a night. And I want to add to that. We're going to close here, but I want to add to that is also to look at yourself holistically. Because if you look at your mind, your body, and your spirit, and I'm sure you've heard this and you think, oh, that's a California hippie thing, but you are this collective being. And the mind and the body and the spirit interact with each other. So we were talking about anxiety and stress, and what does that do to your physical body and your immune system? And the spirit piece of it is the hiking, is looking up at the sky, is taking care of yourself like that. So not only do you take care of your body, you take care of your mind and your spirit. And there's really easy ways to do that. For me, it's gardening at 4 in the morning. You know, it's going to bed at 8:30 with ice cream. It's a little bit.
I like to do aerial, okay? I have some aerial rigs in my backyard. Yeah. I like to get out there and hit the trapeze or the lyra or the silks. I love that.
But most importantly, take care of yourself holistically and stuff. And we will get through this. And, you know, Dr. Kristy will be back with us and share some other stuff on a future salon. But I know we've taken up a lot of your time. These are going to go on C Gallery's YouTube site. It'll also be pushed out on all our social media feeds if there's a topic that you would like to hear about. And the salons are arts and culture. So arts and culture and health and wellness. The next salon, well, it won't be live fed, but on Saturday, Twyla Casador San Carlos Apache is going to be doing an edible medicinal walk here in DC Ranch. And then we're going to do a tasting of some of the forest items in a contemporary fusion. The following one I'm doing on, I think, the 17th. You can find all of this on our website. I'm going to be talking about Day of the Dead, holistically, the celebration of life. So arts and culture and wellness. And the Day of the Dead piece, when you think, well, what is the Day of the Dead? It's not only a celebration of life, but it's an intimate, personal interaction with death that I've experienced from a child. It's ancestral. So looking at health and wellness and how we tackle those things in our life that are going to come up. Death is a given. Illness is a given. Cultures that we live around and stuff. So see Salons, check us out on our website. You want to end with something?
Oh, I did. You mentioned the medicinal foods. Think about going vegan, because if you think about it, if everybody were vegan like me, we wouldn't have these breeding grounds for pandemics, right? We wouldn't have all these animals suffering and breeding viruses. So think about it. It's very healthy. It's a great diet for heart, for lower risk for heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, all that stuff. So
yeah, I tried
think
vegan.
about it, or at least plant-based, kind of go towards
And
it.
it's interesting because when I thought vegan, I was like, and I was in San Francisco 17 years, which, a lot of vegan and vegetarian, but it was almost political. But when my partner wanted to go vegan, I'm like,
Yeah.
But when I started thinking about world cultures in food, I'm like, oh, well, there's a lot of Japanese, there's Thai, and there's tons of great ways to eat healthy out there. I'm not vegan, I eat meat, but we've reduced the amount of meat and what types of meat, within a 2-year period and stuff like that. So holistically, taking care of yourself can be a very fun process. It can be an exploratory process through food and culture and environment and geographically. So I'm going to leave you with that. Kristy, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys
Always a
for tuning
pleasure.
in, who tuned in. And I see some comments there. I'll answer them later. But this is C Gallery. I am Jeffrey. And if you can be here Saturday, I'll send some photos out if not. Thank you. Bye.
Were there questions?
Very good.